Today I'm going to be sharing the process of how I go about doing the sketching phases of this piece. And later on, it's going to be turned into a painting. So I'm working on the Verdance Tarot, and I've gotten to the Ace of Pentacles. I have here the sketches that I did for the aces. So these were a couple of the sketches I did for the Ace of Swords, and this here was a sketch for the Ace of Wands. And now I'm getting started on the Ace of Pentacles. You can see this is a very, very rough little thumbnail that I did. And the basic idea here that I had was I wanted to have the central symbol being one of the maybe ancient symbols of bees, because there's some that are on ancient Greek coins, and I like the idea of using that. And this is going to be either an olive or an almond tree, and a honeycomb kind of dripping with golden honey below and the roots tangling down beneath. So from there, what I did was I took this little thumbnail sketch and I put it on my computer and I blew it up to the size that I'm going to be doing the painting at, which is 8 by about 12 inches. So slightly bigger than this sheet of paper. So some of it got cropped off at the top and bottom, but essentially this is the real size of it. But as I was going to start using this to transfer my sketch to my watercolor paper, I realized I really need to straighten up my honeycomb and make those actual hexagons. So I went back onto my computer and I drew a very exact hexagon using just lines and rotating by 60 degrees. And so I created my perfect hexagons. And then I cut and pasted and replaced my blobby pencil scribbles with the actual lines. And then I also went and created a more exact bee symbol that I wanted to use. So this was an adaptation of an Egyptian symbol for a bee goddess. And I modified it a little bit to be a little bit more Art Nouveau-y in its presentation, but maintaining the same essence still. And the rest of this is still, you know, the exact little thumbnail here blown up to this larger size. Now, the next step then was using this to trace into a much more detailed sketch. Most of the time when I'm doing watercolor paintings, I do not do a phase like this. I do not turn it into an ink drawing. Ink drawings tend to be my final finished product as far as most of the ink pieces go. But in this case, I decided that for the Verdance Tarot, I wanted to actually just use the ink drawing as a chance to work out all my sketch details, and then also at some later point in the future possibly use these to create a coloring book based on the tarot drawings. So I have a very nice cleaned up version of my sketch. Here's where we've progressed so far. We've gone from this little scribble here to the expanded blown up scribble on my computer and then to cleaning up some of the elements that are easy to do on a computer, such as the hexagons, and getting those all lined up perfectly. And then I have my ink drawing. And the next step, which I'm going to show you here, is going to be to transfer this ink drawing to my watercolor paper. And this is what I'm going to be painting on in the final phase. And to do that, I'm going to take this and I'm going to use a light tablet and trace onto my watercolor paper with pencil. The first thing I do is I'm going to take my ink drawing here and I'm just taping it down onto a light tablet so that it doesn't move. And then I'm going to put my watercolor paper on top of that and tape that as well. And I'm going to be using pencil to do this sketching. I've got my little light tablet here connected, into this brick just for convenience so I don't have to stay close to a wall. Masking tape taped my watercolor paper on top of my initial sketch. And now I'm going to use pencils to trace my design, my image onto the watercolor paper so I have something to work on when I start painting. And you can see if I turn my light off or if I control the dimness of my overhead light, I get more or less control over what I can see through coming from the light behind this. If you have the light turned way down, then you're going to see a lot more of what is coming through from your tracing material. And if you have the light turned way up, then you'll get more of your paper surface, so that you can kind of play with that and use the best combo of them to get your drawing onto your watercolor paper surface. Okay, from here, I'm going to be turning this into time lapse, just so that we can get through this without me completely boring you as I slowly craft each of my lines. But this is where I'm tracing the ink drawing. And I'm not just doing a direct tracing. I use this as a further chance to refine the sketch. Every time I trace and redraw my image, I am using that to make minor corrections. Sometimes the corrections are a little bit more involved as I go from the initial thumbnail to the slightly more refined versions. But even at this late refinement stage, there's still some of that going on because there are little elements that I'm going to tweak here and there. The composition is mostly in place already by this point, especially when I have gone through such a detailed ink drawing. But there is still some wiggle room for little elements, sometimes the placement of branches or the exact curvature of some of these lines of the branches and how they interact with the composition as a whole. Things like these hexagons, that's pretty fixed. There's nothing changing with this. And for this part, it's mainly just getting that down onto this paper as the same as I had at all the previous stages. But here, where I'm working on the more organic bits, this is where some minor changes are going to be happening. Little bits that add to the sort of the essence and the feel and the flow of things overall. And I try not to draw too darkly. I try to keep a fairly light hand. I'm using an HB lead on a 0.2 mechanical pencil, which is generally more fine than most people are comfortable with, but I enjoy doing the extra super fine point. 0.3 or 0.5 is what most people will use and what is more comfortable on the whole in general, because the 0.2 tends to break easily. You'll notice as I'm working that my lighting fluctuates. That's because I'm playing with my overhead lighting, turning it up and down as I need more. Sometimes I require more of my underdrawing to show through because I'm capturing the major lines there. And so that's when I turn my overhead light way down so that the light from the tablet shining through the pages is what is stronger. And that's where you're going to see the the ink drawing from underneath show much more clearly. Other times I turn my overhead light up, and this makes the surface of the page much more obvious, and you no longer see the tracing underneath as easily. And that helps me when I'm trying to figure out what are the changes and the adaptations I'm making at this stage, where I have the the ink drawing underneath as a guide, but I really want to just use that as a guide so that the decisions that I'm making at this point in time are what's going to be integrated into the final piece.
just for the record, so that you understand how long this part of the process takes, this is sped up in time lapse by a factor of 6, and it's taking me about 6-7 minutes to do this in time lapse form. So that means that in real time, doing this sketch took me a little bit over half an hour, between 30 to 40 minutes to do this part.
All right, here I have the finished drawing. It's ready for painting now. I'm just going to have to tape it down to a board, and I can start the next phase of this.
And now I am using artist tape. This is an acid-free tape to affix my sketch to a masonite board. And this is what I'm going to be using as I'm painting.
One final thing I do after I have my painting taped down to my board is I take a large soft brush with clean water and I do just a quick brush over my pencil drawing. This helps to get the pencil graphite to kind of adhere and sink into the page a little bit, and this allows for it not to get all smeary and smudgy when you're painting. And so I do this and I let it dry, and then I'm ready for painting after that.
I'll be sharing the process of how I go about painting this piece in one of my upcoming videos. Thanks for watching today.